Alright guys, today's video is on my sow rates. I did have a request, so I'm going to show you a little bit of what I'm doing here to try to help you out. Now again, you don't necessarily have to follow this guideline, but at least I'm going to show you what I've been planting with. And the great thing about this is there's nothing really set in stone as far as how the mix needs to be. The goal is to cram species in here as much as possible. So this is my new experimental strip right here. So pardon my terrible writing, but if you need to pause it right here, you can. This is the other areas of my food plot with what I'm sowing, and of course it just depends on what area that I'm doing this in, but like the area where the deer vetch is going is that open place I tilled in the main food plot. I will mix other species with this, and that would include buckwheat and sun hemp. So in that area, that'll probably be and maybe some Russian mammoth. Yeah, I'll do that. So I'll do sun hemp, Russian mammoth, buckwheat, and deer vetch for that particular area. Other areas will probably get everything but deer vetch, and of course, depending on how my soil responds with this mix, I may start pulling more of these out and putting them in. But the simplest way to improve your soil is to usually plant as many species as you can. So I'm going to go over a few things that I pay attention to when it comes to sow rates. And this has faded out a bit, but this was a 20-pound bag, and you can calculate your percentages based on that 20 pounds to get a rough idea of what you're putting out per acre. Over here is what you want to really look at: germination rates. So if you notice, there's some here that's got 95%, there's a 90, then we start dipping down here a little bit, 88, 86, 84. So even at a sow rate, if you look at mung bean here, that's 10%. So that's about 2 pounds per acre, and only roughly 84% of that will come up. So you have to kind of think about that a little bit when you're planting. Unless you got a really diverse food plot, you know, stick with whatever you know works. But I like to diversify, and as my budget gets better, I will seek out other species to add. I also buy individual seed packets, that is a pure bag of buckwheat, so I can modify the blend myself if I'm not happy with, say, just, and as an example that I would use, so let's say I'm putting it out at 2 pounds per acre, but I don't like the fact that I don't feel like I have enough. Well, I can change that. I can come in and put it out at 3 pounds an acre, and to do that I can grab it out of here and add to the mix if I need to do so. Now, another thing I like to do when it comes to reviewing my mixes, if you watch the video about learning about deer browse, there are other ways that I learn what species my deer prefer. So let's say, for instance, that I plant sunflowers and I use my Russian mammoth. So I put them out at a ½ pound per acre, but the deer destroy them. I will kind of take note of that and say, okay, well, maybe I need to up that to 1 pound per acre, and that way I can give the deer more something what they like, but I still keep the diversity going. And you can even pull away from these. So maybe you don't want mung bean in your food plots. Well, you can scratch that, get rid of it. You can find something else to replace it with. These mixes are something you get to experiment with and have fun, basically. I like trying different things, so I know that through the years, and this takes time to develop, that my deer hate turnips. Well, used to, I sowed turnips pretty thick. Now I don't. I've really backed off the amount of turnips that I've put in my food plot, but I'm still getting that benefit of the turnip even though my deer are not necessarily destroying the turnips. So I plugged it in with other species to replace something I take off. It doesn't have to be too complicated, but let's look at this one here. So anytime you want a species to eventually be dominant in your food plot, I generally go with high seeding rates. So for instance, like all that Eagle Seed soybean you saw growing in the bottom part of the plot, that's at 70 pounds per acre. Now, this is what you don't necessarily have to stick to. You're going to learn that you don't necessarily have to go by these rates. Now on the Eagle Seed, I generally put that high because my food plot is not a large plot. I just don't have permission to expand right now. So I pack it in with high amounts of soybean, and over time the soybean starts choking out other species. So for instance, like buckwheat, it may look really robust in the food plot, and then the flowering cycle kicks in, buckwheat dies back, or deer browse it back and prevent it from sticking above soybean, and then soybean takes over. I still got the benefit of what the buckwheat plant did for my soil, and also the protein that the deer would take if they are browsing it. Now for instance, let's say you have, I need to try to hold this still. Let's say you have a large plot, and we're talking, food plots above 10 acres, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever you're planting. Sowing at 70 pounds per acre in a large plot is probably too high for most people. Generally, I've seen them drop it down to 40 pounds per acre, and then you can replace it with other species. So you can change and modify your numbers as you see fit. There is no real set solution, and I know some of you are probably members of the Growing Deer channel and use green cover. I've started using this more. They do have a smart mix system in their website to where you make the mix you want. So if you're looking at their food plot seed packs that they offer, or seed bundles, to where they show different species, if you don't like what you see, you can go in and personally get your own mix at whatever rate you want, and then they send that to you. So if you don't want to deal with that and you're happy with what's on the bag, generally I try sowing what the bag says when I initially do experimental strips, and I will use this again for up to 3 years to really give me an idea of what my deer want. Because over time, say for instance, like this plant here, I introduced deer vetch this year. The deer hardly browsed it. I'm not penalizing my deer year one because it's a new plant. They've never seen it before. So deer can be hesitant to browse on a new plant. I did start seeing evidence late in the season that they started nipping this stuff off. So at least one, if not two deer or more may have figured out that, hey, this is actually a good plant. So if I keep my 10-pound rate again, I sow it out the second year, my browse may double, may triple, maybe 10 times more, 100 times more. And so if that gets mowed down, that means I may need to try to up the rate or put other species in here to try to take a little pressure off of it. But it did grow so thick, I didn't have that problem this year. So by year 3, the deer's figured it out. And that's, and instead of waiting to hit it when it gets so tall, they might hit it as soon as they see it come out of the ground. So their browsing habits can change, and it can cause me to modify my blends a bit. So I never have like a set ratio that I generally go by, except for the Eagle Seed. And let me see if this bag's clear enough to show you what I use such a high rate for. I know 70 pounds seems like a lot, but if you read the bag, look at the germination rate, 80%. That's not 100%. So you are not guaranteed that all 70 pounds is going to come up. So if I'm sowing at a rate of 70 pounds per acre, you need to subtract that particular poundage by 20% in order to make up for what's not coming up. So I'm still leaving this at 70, but if 20 pounds is not coming up, or 20% of that is not going to germinate based on what the bag told me, then the actual amount that would germinate would probably be around 56 pounds per acre. So that's one reason why I tend to keep that number a little high, is to help override that 20% non-germination rate. And that's one of the kind of the problems with some of the soybean, is germination rates tend to be lower than a lot of these other particular species. So again, mostly I will follow the bag, and I will give it up to 3 years, and then if I see that there is the need to modify my blend, I will do so. If I want to stick out another species, but I don't want to lose any of these, that's fine. I leave this the exact same way, and I can introduce another set of species into the list. And if I figure out I want it at 1 pound per acre, 1/2 pound per acre, I can still throw it in with this. When you're doing mixes, it's basically the strongest will survive at this point. So there's also the rotational factor that I learned through this bag, that initially your sun hemp will be good to eat right off the bat. Your mung bean, your iron clays can be hit pretty quickly. Your grain sorghum won't. Your black oil sunflowers can be. Your buckwheat can be. The clover can be. And the deer didn't really hit this. So the rapeseed and the radish pretty much got to grow as is. So that may be something in the future that I could reduce that to 2.5 and drop that down to 1 or something like that. It just depends on what you want to do and how your deer respond to different species. But if you're after soil improvements, this list of species in here can be a lot longer than this if you want it to be so. So this is just kind of what I'm doing. And I'm sorry about my terrible handwriting. I just quickly wrote something down here for this particular video. Now, the grain sorghum, I saw some of the bucks on my trail cameras hitting this about 2 weeks ago, and that's a good sign. That's the first time I've put sorghum in there, and it didn't take them long to figure it out. So next year, or this coming planting season, I'm going to kind of keep this in mind, but I won't know until the fall of 2024 or later if they're going to really hammer this go around. But the fact that I saw visiting bucks eating off of this multiple times gives me a good idea that I'm going to expand this grain sorghum into other parts of the plot and mix it with the soybean. This grain sorghum does not get very tall, so my only concern is the soybean may choke this out. So I may try to sow it, I don't know, maybe a hair thicker than that to see if I can get something to survive. Some of that may not make it, but it did survive in the cowpeas, but the cowpeas were kind of pushed down, compacted, and laying over each other, where my soybean was standing up to 5 feet deep this year. So that could present a bit of a problem, but we'll wait and see, and that's why I'm not afraid to try something. I may mix a very small amount of sorghum with the deer vetch. I'm still kind of contemplating that idea. I'm not sure yet, but it would in fact increase my grains, but that means I won't be able to till it down. So I have to be mindful about trying different things. And that's just a general idea of what I do. It's nothing over the top. And if you do get bald spots in your food plot per se, I designate buckwheat and sun hemp as my fill-in species so I can improve that part of the soil. There's limits on some of these, is how far out you can set these out. If you wanted to, you can still plant sunflowers at a later time to fill in parts of the plot, and deer will browse them off. So you can have sunflowers at various stages. You can use, I don't have a lot of browse on this particular plant, either one of these. I'm not really keen on putting them out. I would rather have something I know the deer are liking a lot and adds to my soil. So I use those as gap fillers when needed. All right, guys, hope you like this video. And of course, if you have any questions to what I'm doing here, feel free to leave those in the comments. If it's helped you out, you can put that in the comments as well. But I'm not saying that this is the absolute mixes to go by. This is just what I use, and there's all kinds of other correct ways to create a food plot with multiple species. I just try to tell people to try to stay away from that monoculture where you plant maybe just one species and that's all your plot consists of. I find deer tend to do a lot better size-wise the more you stick in your food plots. All right, guys, hope this helped you, and if you do like this content, hit that like and subscribe. You all have a great day.